"Hey, Blackie, go serve." The words cracked through the chandelier's glow, scattering laughter like broken glass across the marble floor of the West Haven Grand Ballroom. Linda didn't blink, standing by the champagne tower in a plain ivory dress. No sequins, no glittering proof of her authority. She raised her phone to her ear. Across the room, the woman who'd shouted, pointed, triumphant, flanked by men in tuxedos whose smiles gleamed like blades. One of them even snapped his fingers, a mock command. Linda spoke into the phone, her tone measured. "It's happening. Cancel the $900 million deal." The laughter thinned. They hadn't heard her words, only seen the quiet certainty in her posture, the stillness of someone who knew exactly where power sat. "Which catering company are you with?" a tall man called, champagne glass raised. "If you're quick, we might tip." Another voice joined in, syrupy and cruel. "Sweetheart, this is for investors only." Music still floated through the room, but the air had changed. A photographer froze mid-shot. A young reporter near the stage slid out her phone, camera poised. Linda's lips curved faintly, enough to register, not to reassure. She'd seen this before. Arrogance dressed as civility. At 28, she'd been ushered out of her own meeting because someone didn't recognize her name. At 34, mistaken for her assistant while sealing a global acquisition. "Security!" the tall man barked. A guard looked up, uncertain. Then the matriarch of the group, pearls, poise, and practiced authority, reached forward, tore the event pass from Linda's wrist. The paper's rip sliced through the music. "Get her out." Linda didn't move. The phone stayed to her ear. "Priority 1, she said softly. From across the ballroom, the reporter, Elizabeth, felt her pulse quicken. She didn't know the woman in ivory, but she knew that expression, the calm before a reckoning. Her phone's red record light glowed steady between champagne flutes. The chandelier's light turned colder, sharper, catching judgment in 100 mirrored eyes. The tuxedoed men stayed rooted, their voices rising as if they owned the air itself. "Which table hired you?" the tall man pressed. "You're holding up service," the pearl-necklaced woman added. Linda met their eyes, unmoved, one hand at her side, one still on the phone. A passing waiter slowed, jaw tight but kept moving. The matriarch's heels clicked closer. "Sweetheart, this event is for investors who actually matter." She gestured toward the guard again. "Escort her out." But the moment had already turned. The cameras were watching now. The guard hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty tightening his stance. Linda saw it instantly, the same pause she'd witnessed countless times before, where duty collided with bias and neither quite knew how to win. She remembered another night years ago, when a hotel clerk stalled just long enough to invent a reason she couldn't have the suite she'd already paid for. That hesitation had a shape. She'd learned to read it. At last, the guard started toward her, steps cautious. "Ma'am, I'll need to see your pass." "M6. You can't," Linda answered calmly, tilting her head toward the shredded strip of paper still in the older woman's hand. Across the room, the reporter adjusted her camera, zooming in on the pearls gleaming above that small act of cruelty. The woman's smile was all command. "Your choice, darling. Easy or hard?" Linda's voice cut through the murmur. "You already picked hard." She returned the phone to her ear. "Shift the funds to Harlow. Skip the signing. Now!" Gasps spread through the ballroom like dropped glass. "Did she just say Harlow?" someone whispered. The tall man gave a laugh too sharp to sound confident. "You expect us to believe that bluff?" "No bluff," Linda said evenly. "Business." Elizabeth stepped forward, her voice steady. "She belongs here. Her name was on today's investor list." The man sneered. "Check again." "I did," Elizabeth replied, lifting her phone higher, "and others saw it too." A waiter, barely out of his teens, spoke from the edge of the crowd. "She's telling the truth." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried. The matriarch's grin wavered, thin as a thread about to break. Linda let the silence breathe before speaking softly into her phone. "Proceed to phase 2. The guard stopped mid-stride. He didn't understand what those words meant, but he sensed they shifted the ground beneath him. The music still played, but faintly now, like it belonged to another world entirely. The woman in pearls stepped closer, perfume cutting through the air. People like you always try to climb where you don't fit. Linda met her eyes, unmoving. The tall man reached into his pocket and pulled out another badge. Here, maybe this one fits your story. He tore it in half, letting the pieces float down like pale snow. Gasps followed the fluttering paper. Elizabeth moved fast, circling with her camera steady. "She's creating a scene," the woman barked. "Get her out!" The guard advanced again. Linda didn't step back. "On what grounds?" "Fraud," the man snapped. "She's pretending to be an investor, trying to crash a $900 million transaction." That number stopped conversations cold. From a nearby table, someone muttered, "That's the Whitmore deal." Linda's expression barely shifted. "Confirm the withdrawal," she said quietly into the phone. "Send all capital to Harlow Group. Alert both legal teams." A cough cut through the quiet. The tall man tried to laugh again, but the sound cracked midway. "You can't move anything. You're nobody." The young waiter spoke again, louder now. "She's not nobody. Nobody cancels a $900 million deal." The matriarch turned on him, fury rising. "Enough, boy!" The strings played on, thin, brittle, pretending nothing had changed. "Too late," Elizabeth said, her tone sharpening like glass under pressure. "You made it everyone's business the second you tore up her pass." The guard froze mid-stride. His eyes darted between the pearl-necklaced matriarch, Linda, and the growing semicircle of spectators. Phones were up now, red dots blinking like a constellation of quiet defiance. Linda's voice stayed even, the calm before something irreversible. "One last time. Are you sure you want me removed?" "Absolutely," the matriarch replied, chin high. "Do it." The guard stepped forward. Linda moved too, not back, but into the space between them, a deliberate advance that broke their circle. The matriarch flinched, a microsecond of doubt that the crowd caught like scent in the air. "You just told the wrong woman she doesn't belong in the room she owns," Linda said. The tension cracked open. The ballroom hummed, charged, no longer an audience, but witnesses. Every whisper felt electric. She lifted the phone again. "Proceed to phase 3. On the line, a composed voice answered. "Understood. Legal's ready. Capital transfer initiated." The tall man gave a brittle laugh. "Phase 3? What is this? Performance art?" Linda's gaze finally turned to him. "Not a performance," she said. "An audit." The word fell heavy, final, like iron on glass. Elizabeth's voice carried from the side. "If she's bluffing, why do you look nervous?" Her phone stayed raised, framing both Linda and her accusers. The matriarch's reply came fast, too fast. "Because this woman's trying to humiliate my family in public." "No," Linda said softly. "I'm simply letting your actions tell the story." The guard shifted again. He'd worked enough upscale events to know when a script had flipped. This one wasn't going the way it was supposed to. Near the champagne tower, a waiter whispered to another, "She's not losing control. She's directing it." Sarah's voice returned through the receiver. "Corporate has flagged the Whitmore portfolio. Breach of good faith confirmed. Should I loop in Harlow's team?" Linda's eyes swept the room. Phones were everywhere now, steady and unashamed. "Yes," she said. "Make it public." The tall man barked a laugh that didn't last. "Even if you had the power, no one cancels a $900 million deal mid-gala. That's not reality." Linda's smile was razor-thin. "It is in mine." The matriarch stepped forward, voice trembling between fury and disbelief. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" "Yes," Linda said, her tone a blade of composure. "Do you?" It landed, not just with them, but with everyone watching, people who were starting to realize who Linda actually was. Elizabeth exhaled softly. "I think we're about to find out." The guard hesitated once more, caught between obedience and self-preservation. Linda lowered her phone, her calm now edged with finality. "You've called me a fraud," she said, "torn my credentials, tried to erase me from a deal I built. I've been patient." She stepped closer, the space tightening. "Patience is over." Sarah's voice came through again, crisp. "All teams notified. Statement ready. You're clear." Linda looked from the matriarch to the tall man, to the light glinting off the pearls that had started it all. "Good," she said. "Let's finish this." The ballroom seemed to inhale. The silence had weight now, pulling everything toward Linda. The light, the stairs, the waiting. Even the chandelier leaned, its glow sharpening against the tension. Every camera followed her. The quartet had stopped mid-phrase, bows hovering in mid-air. Linda stepped forward, the sound of her heels counting down the seconds. "For 15 minutes, she began, her voice clear, deliberate. "You've treated me like I didn't belong in the room I paid for. You've called me a fraud. You've called security. You've torn up my credentials, right here in front of everyone." The tall man tried for a smirk. It didn't land. The matriarch's grip tightened on her clutch, the muscles in her jaw working like gears. "And through all of that," Linda continued, her tone softening but sharper somehow, "not one of you asked my name." The pause that followed was absolute. Every lens adjusted, red light steady as heartbeats. "I am Linda," she said, her voice carrying to the far corners of the hall. "CEO of Brooks Global, the architect of the deal you've been toasting tonight, the $900 million Whitmore acquisition. I built it, I funded it, and as of 5 minutes ago, I handed it to your competitor." The air cracked. The matriarch blinked once, speechless. The tall man's arms loosened, hands falling uselessly to his sides. A wave of gasps moved through the room. Then, somewhere in the back, a single clap. Another joined. Then, another. The applause rose unevenly, a tide that knew which way it was turning. "You're bluffing," the tall man said finally. Linda tilted her head almost gently. "Check your phone." He hesitated, then pulled it from his pocket. The colour drained from his face. Around him, screens lit up like fireflies. A headline flashed across them. "Whitmore Global loses $900 million deal transferred to Harlow Group." The matriarch read it too. Her pearls trembled against her throat. Elizabeth's camera captured the exact moment her posture broke. "I didn't have to raise my voice," Linda said into the stunned quiet. "Didn't have to call the press. You handled the publicity yourselves. I just let the truth breathe." The guard stepped back, realizing where the line between authority and regret began. Near the champagne tower, the young waiter whispered, "She owns the room now." No one disagreed. The energy fractured, glasses clinked, murmurs tangled, and shame filled the air like smoke. The tall man's face flushed crimson. "We can fix this," he muttered to the matriarch. "No," she hissed. Her eyes darted toward the exit, but escape wasn't possible. Every camera in the room was already pointed her way. Elizabeth zoomed in. The pearls gleamed like small, nervous moons. Across the floor, the same waiter folded his arms, a quiet smile curling his mouth. The quartet had lowered their instruments completely. The music was over. One of the Whitmore advisors stepped forward, voice cracking. "Linda, please, we can renegotiate." She didn't even turn. "You could have done that when you thought I was worth your time. You didn't." A beat passed, then, the guard, still standing nearby, murmured softly, "Ma'am, my apologies." For the first time that night, Linda's expression eased. Her eyes softened. Only slightly, but enough to remind everyone she'd always been in control. It wasn't forgiveness, just recognition. Linda gave the guard a brief nod, then turned back to the Whitmores. The tall man tried once more, his voice cracking under its own weight. "Look, we didn't—" "You did," Linda said, cutting clean through his plea. "And now you live with it." Silence followed. Then Elizabeth's voice, quiet but captured on a dozen recordings. "This is what it looks like when power doesn't need to shout." A murmur of assent swept the room. Applause followed. steadier now, filling the vaulted ceiling with a rhythm that no orchestra could match. Others didn't clap. They simply filmed, understanding they were witnessing a story that would outlive the night. The matriarch tried one final reach. "We can make this right." Linda took a step toward her, unhurried but absolute. "Right," she said softly, "would have been recognizing me before I had to introduce myself. Right would have been treating a stranger with respect. What you have now is consequence." The quiet that settled next felt heavier than anger. From near the buffet, the young waiter spoke again, his tone clear and firm. "You don't get to erase someone twice." The words hung like a verdict. Even the security guard nodded. Linda straightened. "This conversation is over. So is your claim to my time." She turned and began walking toward the exit. Phones followed her movement, the murmurs of the crowd retreating like an ebbing tide. Behind her, the Whitmores stood motionless, pearls, tuxedos, and panic frozen in the glare of their own undoing. For the first time all night, Linda didn't need to say another word. Then came the vibration. The tall man's phone buzzed twice, the glow of the screen bleaching the colour from his face. 3 missed calls from the Whitmore board chair. A heartbeat later, the matriarch's clutch rang, the shrill tone slicing through the hush like reprimand. She didn't answer. Across the room, the advisor in navy stepped away, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and strained. The message was obvious even without words. Damage control had begun, and it was already failing. Elizabeth's camera followed the collapse, the shifting stances, the rapid-fire texts, the tremor of panic that rippled through designer suits. Her quiet narration caught it all. The empire unravels in real time. Guests who'd once orbited the Whitmores began to drift away, smiles evaporating into distance. 2 investors near the champagne tower exchanged a glance, turned, and joined the circle forming around Linda instead. Loyalty had changed tables. The matriarch's mask finally cracked. "We need to leave," she whispered, clutching the tall man's arm. "Not yet," he muttered, scanning the room for allies, and finding none. Half the guests avoided his eyes entirely. The quartet in the corner began packing up, their instruments sliding quietly into velvet cases. The gala had ended the moment Linda took the floor. The rest was just aftermath. The waiter from earlier leaned toward his co-worker. "They're toxic now. Nobody wants to be seen beside them." He wasn't wrong. The Whitmore entourage had splintered, pairs whispering, fingers flying across phones. A PR handler rushed in, tablet in hand, her expression a mask of crisis. The tall man glanced at the screen she showed him and swore under his breath. Across the ballroom, Sarah, calm, composed, was speaking with executives from Harlow Group. Their laughter was easy, their posture confident. Papers traded hands, smiles sealed the shift. The matriarch's voice broke into a rasp. "She's destroyed us, right here in front of everyone." The tall man didn't answer. He was staring at Elizabeth's camera, the lens steady and unrelenting. Somewhere behind them, a voice rose from the crowd. "They did this to themselves." Then came the sound that ended it, chairs scraping back, guests leaving without goodbyes. The night was over. The exodus had begun long before Linda reached the doors. People weren't leaving with her. They were leaving them. The Whitmores stood stranded in a ballroom that was no longer theirs, the chandeliers reflecting an emptiness that grew with every departing guest. Collapse wasn't coming. It was already underway. Linda moved without haste. Her stride was measured, deliberate, a lesson in control disguised as grace. Each step left silence in its wake. Sarah appeared at her side, tablet glowing in her hand. "Harlow, contracts finalised," she said quietly. "Whitmore's permissions revoked from the Brooks Global system." Linda nodded once. "Send word to every partner and supplier. They'll want clarity before midnight." Sarah's fingers flew. "Shall I include their attorneys?" "Drown them in the details," Linda replied. Across the shrinking crowd, the tall man's voice cracked through the noise. "You can't cut us off. There are signed agreements." Linda didn't turn fully, just enough for her voice to carry. Agreements stand on mutual respect. You tore that apart before the ink ever dried. A low murmur spread through the room, like wind through glass. She's freezing them out, someone whispered. Completely. Sarah's device pinged. Done. Their access is gone. Good, Linda said. Release the statement. Make it clear. Brooks Global doesn't fund humiliation. Elizabeth's camera caught the precise moment Sarah pressed send. One small motion, yet it split futures in two. The matriarch's composure splintered. This is cruelty. Linda met her eyes. This is consequence. Accountability isn't cruelty. It's math. You get back what you invest. The woman's lips trembled, words lost before they formed. A waiter approached, tray balanced high. Linda stopped him with a small gesture. One, please. She lifted the flute, then added, and send another to the Harlow table. Congratulations are earned. Across the floor, Harlow's executives raised their glasses in answer. Celebration had changed sides. Sarah leaned close again. Shall I begin the portfolio audit? Yes, Linda said. Anything tied to Whitmore, flag it and close it. The tall man took a hesitant step forward, but froze as phones tilted toward him, recording every breath. He knew better than to hand them another headline. Linda set the untouched champagne back on the tray. No need to toast this, she said softly. It isn't a win. It's a correction. She turned toward the exit. Behind her, the Whitmores were left suspended in silence, locked out of more than a business network. Then came the sound of notifications. Dozens, hundreds. Screens glowed across the room, faces bent to read the news breaking in real time. Elizabeth's voice cut through, crisp for her live feed. Official statement from Brooks Global. Partnership with Whitmore Group terminated effective immediately. Cause: breach of values and public misconduct. She glanced at the lens. That's confirmation, not speculation. Across the floor, Harlow's team rose, shaking hands with investors who had once bowed to the Whitmores. The centre of gravity had shifted, and everyone knew where it now rested. Near the back, one older investor whispered to another, Pull everything tied to Whitmore before the markets open. His companion nodded, already typing the email that would finish what Linda started. A PR representative in a navy sheath dress slipped into the far corner, phone pressed tight against her ear. Cancel tomorrow's press conference. No, don't move it. Cancel it outright. We're in damage control now. Her gaze flicked toward the Whitmores, then away, as if even being seen near them was contagion. Nearby, the young caterer who'd spoken up earlier passed Elizabeth and whispered, It's like watching a skyscraper collapse in slow motion. Elizabeth didn't answer. Her camera did. The lenses had shifted from Linda to the aftermath, the shrinking circle of the powerful who suddenly weren't. Advisors peeled away in quiet pairs. The matriarch stared at the marble floor as if it could still hold her dignity. Across the ballroom, Linda was conferring softly with Sarah near the exit. No raised voice, no grand gestures, just clean, decisive command. A few guests approached cautiously, extending cards, trying to recalibrate their loyalties. Linda accepted some, declined others, her composure giving each rejection its own kind of weight. Power wasn't loud, it was selective. A young reporter sidled up beside Elizabeth. Is she always this exact? Elizabeth kept filming. Precision is the point. Across the room, the tall man's phone rang again. He silenced it, jaw set. The matriarch lifted her eyes, scanning for anyone who might still meet her gaze. No one did. From the balcony above, a photographer caught the shot that would define the night. Tables empty on one side, the crowd gathered around Linda on the other. It wasn't a photo of chaos. It was a portrait of transition, the instant a legacy changed hands. By the time Linda began her final walk to the door, the Whitmores were already fading from relevance. Online, their names trended not for a billion-dollar triumph, but for a very public downfall. The ripple was still moving, fast, unstoppable, reaching far beyond the ballroom. The next morning, the setting had changed. No chandeliers, no applause, just glass walls, a long walnut table, and a skyline reflected in the polished surface. Brooks' global headquarters was built for focus, not spectacle. Linda sat at the head of the table, Sarah on her right, two Harlow executives to her left. The screen behind them flashed live market data. Whitmore Group stock down 14% in the first hour. Donald, Harlow's silver-haired CEO, leaned back with a faint smile. You've already dismantled their biggest deal in a decade. What comes next? Linda didn't pause. We make sure they can't rebuild with borrowed capital. No sympathy infrastructure. Sarah slid a file forward. Here's a full list of shared vendors and subcontractors between us, Harlow and Whitmore. 60% have already signed new contracts. Donald scanned it, eyebrows lifting. You're cutting clean? I'm cutting permanent, Linda replied. They'll have to start over, and by the time they do, their leverage and reputation will be gone. One of Harlow's younger executives checked his tablet. Press coverage is holding steady in your favor. If we frame this right, it becomes precedent, industry standard, zero tolerance for public misconduct. Do it, Linda said, and make it loud enough that no one mistakes silence for neutrality. Sarah's phone vibrated. She looked down, then smiled. Investor Coalition just pulled another $200 million from Whitmore's portfolio. Donald gave a low whistle. You've turned them into a warning overnight. Linda's expression didn't change. Good, she said. It's where they belong. Outside, the city hummed against the glass. Inside, no one spoke. The sound of consequence was quieter than anyone expected. Before we close, Linda said, one last directive. The room quieted again. I want legal to audit every pending patent, trademark, and licensing file in Whitmore's system. If it fits our portfolio, acquire it before they can. If it doesn't, hold it long enough that they can't use it. Donald arched a brow. That's assertive. Linda met his look without blinking. It's necessary. The plan was clean, ruthless, and completely within regulation. By the time the meeting adjourned, Whitmore's future had narrowed to a pinhole. As the Harlow team prepared to leave, Donald paused at the door. You know, he said half smiling, most people would have stopped at moral victory. Linda gathered her folders. Moral victories earn headlines. I prefer results. She walked toward her office, the skyline catching in the glass ahead, a city glowing with late light, every tower like a piece on a chessboard she already controlled. The sun turned the city gold. Glass towers burned in its reflection. From the corner office of Brooks Global, Linda stood with her hands in her pockets, watching the horizon. On her desk lay a single envelope embossed with the Whitmore seal. Sarah had dropped it off an hour earlier with a quiet, "It's marked urgent." Linda didn't open it. She didn't need to. The real power wasn't sealed inside. It was in knowing she already owned the outcome. Letters like that always said the same thing. Polished regret, dressed apologies, hollow offers of reconciliation. Behind her, the muted television replayed clips from the gala, the confrontation, the crowd, the turn. Headlines scrolled beneath. Brooks Global, CEO redefines corporate accountability. 900 million deal, collapse triggers, industry reckoning. The anchor's voice was crisp. The message is unmistakable. Humiliation, whether in the boardroom or the ballroom, now carries a price. Linda took a slow sip of coffee. Steam curled into the air like punctuation. Outside, the city pulsed on. Traffic, window lights, lives continuing. But for the Whitmores, time had stopped. Her phone buzzed, a message from Donald. Vendor lockout complete. Trademark acquisitions in progress. They won't recover. Linda typed 2 words in response. As planned. For a long moment, she stood still, the quiet pressing in. She thought of the torn event pass, the laughter, the command for security, and then of the sound that had followed her departure, the applause that rose not from pity, but recognition. She set the cup down and reached for the Whitmore envelope. Without hesitation, she fed it into the shredder. The blades hummed. The seal split into ribbons. Sarah stepped in as the final shred fell. Press wants to know if you'll give a statement tomorrow. Linda shook her head. Already did. Outside, the last light of the day struck the tallest tower in view, Brooks Global etched high against the fading blue. It glowed, solid and certain. Linda allowed herself a single quiet smile, not for triumph, but for truth. She hadn't just proven she belonged in the room. She'd built the room.